Okay, while Mark's getting some water, I just have two slides here that I want to do before we have the panel discussion. And because the point is, as you all know, this session's name is Securing the Internet of Things. And Andy Chadha this morning, in his keynote talked about the Internet of Things and devices and stuff. And I think I need to define what I want to focus the panel discussion on, because it's a very, very broad topic. I'm not going to constrain the questions, I guess, but, well, maybe I will. We'll see. I'm sorry. Can everybody hear me? I made that mistake again. I apologize. So anyhow, what I have here is just a slide, and this is a slide that Andy used. I think it's the one. It was maybe an earlier version. But, when you talk about the Internet of Things, it's such a broad topic. That term is very broad. We have lots of people building lots of things that they tend to want to use terms that resonates different ways, different versions of Internet of Things. Some of the things that we're talking about, or people talk about, I would say, are consumer devices. The Nest thermostat's the classic, or having something in your house, your door locks and things like that you can get at from the Internet. That's one aspect, kind of the products that people make, and Andy had mentioned that this morning. But the focus for what we're talking about, I think, is more how you use devices within your plant. And it's this idea of enabling access to that information, however it might be, externally. And some people think of that in the broadest context, that I'll just connect it up somehow to Wi-Fi. And not that naively, but you'll connect it somehow, and anybody on the Internet can just get on and access it. Probably few people in here would agree with that. But there's other methods to do it. It's securing the different pathways to it and things like that. And a lot of our companies, a lot of our supplier companies in the automation world are doing that today. I mean, they're developing a lot of devices specifically to provide the benefits of remote access, maintenance, information to different things. I mean, we all know the benefits of that. So what I want to do is focus our panel discussion on that aspect, the devices in plants and exposure to those. And the kinds of questions I had, I just to frame it, these aren't, we can use these as questions, but I just want to frame it. But the kinds of questions I had when this issue came up are things like, so if you're going to expose things, what are the criteria you're going to use as to say that a device should be exposed or not exposed? Again, there's a question of what you mean by exposure as well. But when's a device a good candidate for Internet of Things, using that term broadly? If you do that, what kinds of things do you have to do to ensure that control systems are protected from the IoT communications? If you're going to be exposing this information externally, how do you protect those channels of information from other things? One thing I see a lot in my research on cybersecurity is when you talk about the Internet of Things, you have a whole security issue for the things, all right? Because now you've kind of made them independent of the system. You can talk about zones and things, but if you're taking the extreme and saying, I'm going to have a device that has direct access in some way to the Internet, now you have to somehow secure that. So are those security issues different? And if so, well, how are they different? Or how do I coordinate and have one integrated strategy, or don't I have a strategy like that? And then the big question is, who should be responsible for things that are IoT cybersecurity? Again, if you start building devices, and when I say that, it's not the IT ICS thing, which we've talked about yesterday and sometimes today. It's more, if I buy it from an Emerson or I buy it from a GE, or should they be the ones responsible for ensuring that it's secure? Or is it something the owner-operator has to worry about? Obviously, the owner-operator has to worry about it, but where do we divide that? And then the last question, again, this is framing issues, is what's the role of standards in managing IoT cybersecurity? One of the things I see all the time is the standards always lag the development of things. It's just natural, there's no way you can build the standards. You can't wait for the standards to build the devices, so it's going to lead. So what kinds of standards, are we going to wait for that, or how do we manage those things? So anyhow, with those ideas, I'm just going to leave that slide sit up there just for you all to frame your questions. Let me invite the panelists up now. Where'd Mark go, I guess? Okay, well, when he comes back, he can join us up here. The other people on our panel, I'd like to invite Ashok Acharya from General Electric, Mike Hanna from Rockwell, and Peter Zornio from Emerson. just pick a seat, please. And let me just suggest this while we're waiting for Mark to come back. He'll join us. But, you know, I know each of these are 3 different automation companies, and I just want to give you a chance to just, if you have a position on, again, what I mean, I'm using the word Internet of Things, and I know, you know, GE is the industrial Internet. I think Emerson might be pervasive. Everybody has it. I don't know the Rockwell one, I'm sorry. But everybody probably has something they're doing that they would characterize in that vein, and I just want you to kind of briefly mention that so that everybody's aware of that. Peter, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So, you know, at Emerson, we are kind of the leading supplier of things as far as the Internet of Things goes, right? So we're one of the leading suppliers of sensors, which are certainly the things that everybody's looking forward to providing the data. Chantel, did...
Sorry, Peter, I was just telling Sid that you're coming to Mark.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, just join us up here, Mark, please.
So we've made a lot of networked things that have collected a lot of data. Now, it's been going on for 15, 20, 30 years. We weren't smart enough to marketingly calling it an Internet of Things, nor were we smart enough to call it big data, but now we like to say, okay, we make a lot of things, and we put the data in big data, because basically all that data starts with a sensor somewhere. And lately we've got a strategy that really plays into the Internet of Things that we call Pervasive Sensing, which is fundamentally saying, yeah, we see the opportunity, and we see that there's going to be an incredibly increased number of sensors that are going into manufacturing facilities, not for running the process or the manufacturing so much as for lots of other types of applications. So equipment reliability, energy management, corrosion, all those things, very similar to the picture Sid had up there a little while ago that Andy used. I think from a security point of view, one of the perspectives we would have is, you know, first I'd like to say, Mark, that was fantastic. I mean, that was a very comprehensive, detailed look at a lot of real-world things that you've done, and that was a great presentation. Just as you talked about the segmentation of the networks and the separation of different stuff, I think that exact same thing is going to happen here. So basically today, safety systems, generally everybody puts in, and by regulation, you know, by standards, you keep them very separate, and they're very controlled as to what's on them. Fundamentally, I see all the process and automation networks heading basically to that same set of standards as the safety systems, to where, again, that process data will be highly contained, firewalled, segmented, protected. As years go by, all of us automation vendors will start to do things like provide actual encrypted traffic and whitelisting so that only our applications are on there. So we'll just have to make the one that's actually controlling the ride or controlling the process that much more secure. A lot of this other data, you know, one advantage I think we have over typical cybersecurity problems when you think of banking or other things is, you know, mostly they're both afraid of people putting data in, but also they're afraid of people taking data out, right? Credit card numbers, medical history, whatever it may be. In our cases, we look at what the actual explosion of a lot of this other data is going to be, and it's largely going to be data coming out, okay? It's not necessarily going to have the same security ramifications that the data that's controlling the ride or the process has. It's not going to be that critical if somebody has access to looking at the vibration spectrum coming out of your pump or the, you know what's happening from a corrosion point of view on a pipe. And the majority of this stuff is going to be read-only. It's going to be, you know, data coming out. So what we see is that process automation or you know, the general automation networks are going to be more segmented, more controlled, have all the things that Mark talked about. There will be an issue around security with all these other sensors, but it won't be nearly the same magnitude because it'll largely be data that, quite frankly, if somebody gets a hold of, they're not really going to be able to do anything too nasty with it or do anything, you know, and it's not proprietary. Although I know many end users feel that all data is proprietary, it's really not that critical if one of your competitors knows that you've got a pump that's vibrating too high or something like that. So the bigger problem is, I think, exactly what Mark talked about, which is buttoning down and securing the actual critical networks more so than it is what we see happening with all the other new sensors providing a wealth of new data in other application areas that are not as mission critical or as safety critical as the process data. Just one other thing I want to add to what Mark talked about is, all that great technology and we've got our stuff. The other thing we've seen is the transformation I think that's got to happen is of a mindset one, just like safety. So look, you can have all the safety equipment in the world. If it's not used, it doesn't help. And there's plenty of people in plants today that would never think of walking out the door without putting their hard hat on or taking their escape gear or whatever it may be. Those people don't have the mindset yet of, I better never set up, a backdoor interface into this thing so I can use it to do some remote diagnostics from home or for a vendor to do it. So that's, I think, one of the bigger challenges even still in the whole security thing is the mindset getting transformed into thinking about it all the time the same way that people do with safety. I think Mark had a great point on, if you have an outside guy do that, I'd say that's another part is that culture never gets instilled in the facility, that you need to do it, you need to think that way. So you can't outsource the safety of your facility, you can't outsource the security either. So there's a little...
Okay, thank you, Peter. Mike? Oh, they have one down there. Just move that one back here.
I'll do a stereo.
All right. Or you can hand that over to Mark. Or you guys can share.
Our view, or what you'll kind of be hearing from Rockwell, is around the connected enterprise, the industrial connected enterprise. And it's really the Internet of Things at work for the industrial applications. So, everybody's kind of been talking about the Internet of Things, and really what it is a lot of things are starting to be embedded with intelligence. And these things are starting to be able to communicate with each other. And they're going to communicate over wired and wireless networks. And these things are going to allow machines to be smarter, which means you can now control your processes better, which means you're going to be more efficient. And that's really what it's all about. This is nothing new. One of the things that I like to ask a crowd is, okay, how many people are put devices on the Internet of Things today? Hardly anybody raises their hand. And I say, how many people have a drive on Ethernet? Pretty much everybody. That is the Internet of Things. A drive could be a thing. A robot could be a thing. A machine can be a thing. A plant could be a thing. It's what you define as what you're connecting to. That's the thing that's important to you. And a connected enterprise really is allowing you, as he mentioned, right, a lot of the plants and operations, that's where a lot of data is. That's where the source of the data that you're going to do something with. There's no question about getting data. It's about what are you going to do with the data? How do you put it into actionable format, right? That's the presentation of the data. So as an operator, I know what to do when something happens to a machine. Well, the piece is you've got to deliver that data that is at the source up to where it needs to be, depending on who that is, could be in different locations. Could be on premise, could be off-site someplace. That has to be delivered securely. And that's really what this whole talk about security in the world of the Internet of Things. I think, how many were in the session before this one?
Make sure you mark the poll, took the poll.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So there was really good discussion in that one, as well as Mark's this afternoon. All things that you got to do. There is no one answer for everybody. It really depends on what you need to do as an asset owner. What is the risk? One of the questions that you asked is, how do I consider whether this device needs to go on the network? Just because it can connect doesn't mean it should. If the value outweighs the risk, then it's probably a candidate to go on the network. But ensure that it follows standards. Ensure that whoever's developing that thing that's going to go out in that network, they're developing those products through standards and government regulatory pieces. So,
Okay, Ashok?
Thank you. So from a GE perspective, we have been talking a lot about the connected world, and we have been talking a lot about the brilliant machines. And the experience is all out there. You got, to Mark's point, when I visited for the first time Epcot Center about close to 30 years ago, there was this reality of, there was a ride for the future. And that right there, about 30 years ago, talked about the Internet of Things at that time. So that is really what we're talking about, except that specific thing was related to how it will improve your personal life. Here we're talking about more industrial machines, brilliant machines. So what do we do? What's the philosophy? Does Internet of Things applies, connectivity applies to everybody? I agree with some of the opinions here. It truly depends on the asset owner and their decisions. Is the process variable? Do you really have value in getting that information, or is it just interesting? Those are the criteria that you got to, is the process fairly stable? Is it pretty lame that you don't need to really have those type of connectivities? What about, are you losing the operations information because of the age of the plant, because of the experience is going away? Do you need to put some kind of intelligence into the plant? That way you can analyze the data the same way as the operators with a lot of experience were able to do. Those type of things you do have to factor in. There are other things that come into play. Is really comes down to the value related to really, is it a novel technique? Do you have some IP to protect, or do you have to improve your process? And those type of things can dictate if you really want to connect to the network versus you can live without the intelligence from outside. The other factors come in is, can the service type of things enhance the value of your process? Can you get something more out of it? And those are the things that GE is following in the brilliant machines, where we are putting analytics, we're putting mathematical models up in the cloud that are continuously scanning the data and making sense out of it. And then with that data, we're actually transferring that learned information back to the customer, to the asset owner, so that they can improve their process and actually get more benefits out of it. So cybersecurity for all these things is really kind of has to be inherent to all the brilliant machines and all to the connected world. You really have to take into account, are you dealing with legacy products? Are you dealing with new stuff? If you're dealing with legacy products, a lot of those things are not designed. The brilliant machines are not necessarily designed to have the proper connectivity or proper level of security, so you have to put in, you have to follow the defense in depth type of technologies to really protect the security of that asset. The newer ones, you can actually build the security in as they're being designed.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? You know me, I have tons of them, but please. Oh, there's microphones there, but I put out on a table for this one. I'm talking in the microphone, you all should talk in the microphone. Turn it, you got to turn it on.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi. Quick
Hi.
question, pulling out of the instrument space, if I'm target right now, what mistake did I make? Any opinions based on target stores and the huge security breach? What do you think?
What
the
mistake
mistakes-
did Target make is
Yeah.
the question.
So,
Go ahead.
are you the target, are you saying?
No. The Target department
Big
stores.
security breach that Target just had.
So he's saying, what did Target do wrong? I mean, Target, I personally, I think it's a wonderful question. So.
From my understanding, Target let somebody connect something that wasn't supposed to be connected. And I believe it was a HVAC guy who plugged something in that he shouldn't have.
Oh, really?
That simple. That's to circumvent your system, right? So now somebody's on the inside, and I connect from point A to point B, and oh my God, I'm on the internet. Those kind of things, those kind of controls could have been easily mitigated. Everything that happened to Target and happened to what's that other store? Neiman Marcus could have been easily prevented if they had done the right controls in place. Lots of companies put in firewalls and they don't put in the appropriate filtering or policies because it doesn't let somebody who gets inconvenienced. These are the things that need to be mindful of. where the controls are. You could have easily prevented that, and I can tell you in 2 seconds how you can prevent that. Port security, enable port security. Will you plug something in that's not supposed to be plugged? It disables the port. If somebody gets an alert, there's an IT guy on, running to find out why is it plugged in and why the port's off, or going to look at the port. These things are easily identifiable. Also, MAC filtering. MAC filtering would have stopped it right away, because something not authorized to get out wouldn't. So, it's my 2 cents.
I just want to make, not a comment, a question. I just want to make a comment. One reason why I asked Mark to speak in this session versus the previous session or something. I personally thought it was very interesting. Usually we have plants and we've all talked about air gaps and things like that. And nobody comes in my plant, you can control who comes in and all that. Imagine having a park where your job is to have people walking all through the place. And you have system, and I just thought, that's as close as that's a nice step towards what we're getting to here. It's quite a bit different than a power plant or a refinery or something like that.
We have
At least the ones
27,000 people come in with phones every
and you
day.
specifically invite them.
And we've invited them, and they're paying for that access. And we want them to keep paying for it. We have wireless all over our campus. There's back-of-house wireless, there is front-of-house wireless. We want you to get on the wireless. That wireless does go to our secure networks. It does interface with our our corporate and our right network. I'm not going to tell you how we secure it, but I will say it is secure because we don't stop testing it. We are aggressively testing it at all times. We have partnered with numbers of vendors who actually qualify our equipment to do a lot of this thing. So, as it said, yes, the difference between me and you is that when Potter opened, there was 33,000 people in our park. That's 33,000 people. Out of the 33,000, there was 25,000 with smartphones, all connecting to our wireless, all taking pictures, all tweeting, all accessing at all one time, and about 10% of those people were scanning us because we knew. And there were people scanning the Potter attraction for weeks, and they're still doing it. And other attractions, they scan our wireless to try to get in, and they try a lot. And we still invite them back. We don't stop them, but we know ways of controlling them. And these are things that you can do as well. There are solutions out there that are proven solutions that will do exactly what you want without having to come up with some solution that's going to be highly cost.
Yeah, I was just going
Thank you.
to add to that, and I think you heard it pretty much all afternoon. There is no one product, one technology, or one methodology that's going to protect an industrial control system. You really have to take a defense in depth approach, and that means physical access, policies, and technology as well. Simple things can be done today. If you have an open port, lock it out, either programmatically or put a lockout tag in it. Turn your controllers into run mode. Set your passwords and make sure people are doing things on passwords. Again, just because someone can get on your network shouldn't mean they should. So authenticate who's coming on your network, authorize what they can do on your network, and account for what they are doing on your network. That's really the best thing you can do.
Okay, there was a question here, and then there's another one over here, right? You still have a question?
Just one comment on that, and then my question. I don't know if anybody ever used grc.com to find out what ports they have open. That's a good tool for that. It's free. The other question I had is the Siemens WinCC PLC5 programming software, NI LabVIEW, RSView, these are all products that I've seen on the Usenet in addition to Photoshop and AutoCAD. So the tools, the programming tools, it's no longer a guy needs to, write machine language. They've got the tools that everybody else has out there. So all they need is access to a network. So is there anything to, what advantages do they have? Or maybe they don't have an advantage.
Who wants to?
Okay. I think having, in the old days, of course, these tools were not easily available, so a lot of industrial control security was not, was a little bit protected. But nowadays, with the technology, everybody can buy it off Google or wherever. So the way to approach this is, of course, again, even though you have the tools, you still, if you put in the right certification methods, whether just to download to a controller, you're exchanging proper certificates, or you have some security features built in, then you can thwart them. Again, this all goes back to what my colleagues are saying, esteemed colleagues are saying, is it only works with proper defense in depth. You really have to continuously look at your networks. You have to have the proper zones and conduits. You have to follow truly the proper ISA 99 type of recommendations so that you don't just easily get onto a system and can create some havoc. The other key thing, of course, is if you do have, as Mark was pointing out, if you do have a way to do the red team, blue team kind of scenario where you have the friendly guys looking at your system from a perspective, as well as the hackers coming in from a different perspective, you can reasonably strengthen your system. It's not still going to be foolproof, but you can definitely improve the security of your system.
Over here? Can you hand them the microphone? There's a microphone on this middle table there. Okay.
It's Robert Brooker here from Win 911 Software. We have a substantial minority of our clients want zero connection to physical connection to the internet at all. They just want to take zero chance at all. Do you see that that mentality going away? I mean, do you trust building, or do you think it's going to continue to be some facilities that don't want to be connected at all to the internet?
Is that for everybody, I guess?
I have a kind of a short story that might help this. And Mark actually made this comment in his presentation. And so this has to do with a power substation. And a colleague of mine was telling me about a family member who works as a maintenance guy. And people are coming up with a .22 rifle and shooting holes in transformers. They leak the oil out. 3 hours later, the transformer blows up.
That's the San Diego case. Go ahead.
Yeah. So they have fences around it. Didn't stop somebody. But now, if that device was connected, they would know that the oil level is going down, and they would have been able to detect those things much faster. So to Mark's point, it was more secure and more safe because it was connected versus having it isolated and not connected. That's part of the advantage that you can get when you start sharing and having these things connected.
Oh, I second it. My view on this is it gives the false perception that if you do not have an external connectivity, you're safe. That is not true. You're losing a lot by not having the connectivity, as my colleague described. On top of that, the critical asset information, the critical alerts, the critical other benefits that you can have by somebody actually monitoring your brilliant machines, or somebody actually monitoring your assets, that has a huge value that you completely are locked out of, and that can become a problem down the road. As I said, it comes down to what your process is and what you're doing. Is it a fairly simple, straightforward thing that is so stable that you don't care if you're not connected, or is it something that's fairly variable that you do need to have that intelligence that actually can help you improve your efficiency, productivity, whatever that is. That is so important.
Did you have a comment? It seemed like...
Yeah, sorry. For us, we're adopting, integrating a lot more to the internet. And the reason for that is because we do it securely. We have our methods. But we do that, the reason for it is there's so few of us, including me, for security, as far as industrial security and universal. We are one of four. I'm one of four. And that's it, international. So the ability to access control systems and security systems securely from wherever we're at is important, and that's why we implemented it. I believe companies are, as my colleagues were saying, will adopt depending on need. We have the need, so we're going to adopt it. Other companies will adopt it as well, I think, in the future. And there's new technologies coming out all the time to secure this kind of things. One of the statements was, if it was connected, is it more secure? We believe that. We believe that because we proved it. We proved it to ourselves. It may not be proven to you all, but for us, we did. It provides us a lot greater of information and the ability to react to things than without. So I think other companies are going to see the exact same need and the same, they have the same sort of results. I think there's going to be a constant fear of the quote-unquote boogeyman on the outside, because there is a boogeyman, there is those hackers on the outside. And the only way to address those things is to think like them and have people that do think like them, that can see or think outside the box and think of methods of addressing these kinds of these deficiencies or potential deficiencies, or how to get access to this kind of information. So, but I think as a business, I think businesses will adopt this more and more. It's just when the comfort level gets up to there and the need is there. If the need is there, as my colleague said, there is no reason or rationale to not do it, but you have to do it right. And don't try to do it just because just because will burn you.
So this question actually goes to the vendors. My question to you is, it's no surprise that the Linux kernel, the Android kernel have tremendous vulnerabilities. And I mean, that should be no surprise to anybody in this room. There's lots of reports that have gone out in the last 3-4 months that have even told you how many people have actually been hacked in, if you will. My question to you is, most of the hacking is done because of laziness on the part of the vendor side, or on the part of the user side, for not setting the right passwords or codes. What are the vendors doing to address that? Because if you're using a general, admin password when you actually install the device, that device becomes vulnerable, because anybody can duplicate that device, and most of these devices have backdoors. So I guess my question is, how are you resolving that? Because if I can get anything into the network, the secured network, I can take over any of those control devices.
Go ahead. Okay. Well, I think, first of all, pretty much every vendor I know is aware of that kind of a threat now and is going through, and that's some part of the things that actually ICS CERT does and other guys, is they look for vulnerabilities like that, and if they find one, they tell you, and people go in and fix it. So the kind of default admin password or the default or the backdoor passwords, that stuff is all going away as quickly as vendors can get rid of them. But just the fact that the point you brought up, okay, well, end users are lazy, they didn't go fix it, If you picked up, at least one of the things I certainly picked up from Mark's presentation, we've seen over and over again, is being secure is quite possible, but it's hard work. Nobody likes hard work. Okay, I call it diet pill syndrome. We all love technology that you buy and fixes a problem and you're done. Okay, nobody likes having to get an exercise machine, having to stop eating cheeseburgers, having to, carefully do it, we'd all love the diet pill, buy the technology, fix the problem, okay? Then we even go out and buy technology, so I would say things like firewalls, other technology we have in this problem, or like going out and buying a treadmill or a great exercise machine and then watch it gather dust in the corner of your office and wonder why you're not losing any weight, okay? Because again, all of this stuff takes work practices, change of culture of being awareness of security, like I said earlier, much just like safety. That's all hard work. And, the target stuff, all could have been prevented. Why not? Hard work. And what's the other issue around security is, for all manufacturers, it's all just an expense. It doesn't make another barrel of oil or another, gallon of gasoline or another product coming off the end of the line. It's all insurance against something really bad happening, not helping to produce. So at the end of the day, you can spend a lot of money, a lot of effort on it, and then if nothing happens, you pat yourself on the back and say, okay, great, nothing happened, but you also don't really know if nothing would have happened if you had done half the work you had done. So, I think it's been very difficult for all the end users to really start spending money and putting the effort and the work in to make this happen because of that exact point. Now, you guys have a very, very large threat environment there, as you said, with 20-something thousand people roaming around every day. So it was the probability of occurrence for you, because it's just like a safety equation. It's probability of occurrence, consequence of failure. The probability of occurrence was pretty high for you. So I can see how it probably was not a long debate about whether or not this needed to be done at Universal. But in other process facilities, nobody, if they haven't had an incident, if nothing's happened, it's like, okay, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Okay, so again, it can be done, but it's work and money. It's not just technology. If it was just technology, everybody'd do it and be happy. So I think that was just another illustration, like you said, where end users are lazy about changing it in the beginning.
I think you got it. I just want to add a couple.
So they're
of
saying
points.
it's your fault. Go ahead.
No. I'm saying,
joking.
I understand why
I understand. I agree.
it hasn't happened up until now.
No,
So I just-
Why it hasn't been, emphasized.
I was making a joke, trying to.
Just want to add a couple of things. So you brought up a great point. Yes, a lot of the vendors have been guilty of having standard passwords in the past, and that is changing rapidly. But at the same time, having a really properly set up access control, account management from a user perspective is very important, with basically the fundamental foundation that the lowest privileges is really your foundation, and you got to be able to operate or do your things having the least amount of privileges so that you can protect better. Things that can be enforced that we do typically is we follow we go beyond the Windows recommended password policies, and then we force in our systems for the users to change things, every so often, 30 days, 60 days, whatever, have the proper policy. So those are the kinds of things that can be layered on, but it again falls both ways.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that was one of the questions that you have up there, right, is who's really responsible for security. And really, just like there's no product, no technology, or methodology, there's no one person or group that's responsible. So we all have a role. To get to your answer, I think control vendors need to have a policy and design for security into their products. They should have that as top of their mind when they're developing products. Owners and operators need to make sure that they're doing their homework and they're laying their networks out properly. Let's be real, right? A lot of plant networks today, they weren't designed to be connected to the Internet of Things. They were designed by operations guys, not by IT people. And this whole Internet of Things is really going to foster collaboration between operations, controls, whatever you want to call them, and IT. We heard about that in a couple of presentations. That's what's going to work when you get these departments together. You're going to have one group instead of two managing your network, and you're going to be using one common objective versus two disparate objectives. So that collaboration is going to go a long way in helping everything get more secure moving forward.
Not a vendor, but speaking on behalf of end user. So I'll ask two things, first of all. Well, I'll tell you one thing and I'll ask something. How many people to here think Windows is not secure?
It's not secure?
It's not secure. How many? Come on, raise those hands up. There. Okay. Okay, now, you guys want to follow the DoD standards for Windows for making it secure? Your keyboard won't work. Okay? Now, does that make it functional? No. Okay. What if the default password was, oh my God, Sid, these water bottles are real small? You know, would you want to use that password? No. Okay, that's the reality. Reality is that people don't want hard, complex things. They want it easy. They want it easy to do. We tested a firewall, and it was interesting. This is the thing I had to tell you. So we had a firewall vendor come in, and they go, "Here's our industrial firewall. Try it out." We turned it on and plugged into it, and we're like, "We can't see a darn thing. We can't do anything." And there he's like, "Yes, yes, exactly. You can't do anything." So I said, "Wow, that's awesome. That's almost as if I plugged it into a brick." It's like, "Yes, it is, because it's secure." And I said, "Okay, but I need it useful and secure." So he goes, "Well, you have to connect to it with this certain prong and cable, and you need to run this application and put in this certificate, and then you can start changing settings, because all the same settings are set to on. The firewall is set to 100% on." So I'm like, "Wow, that's brilliant." And the password was huge. It was like, you know, "Today is a great day. I really like hamburgers, ampersand, semicolon, umlaut. How do I do an umlaut with this keyboard?" You know, that was the complexity. Now, they thought to themselves, "Well, this is a great SEO, but you know what? Not useful means I'm not going to buy it. I still need it to be useful." So there's a balance, right? So there's a balance that you need to adopt with these things. Is it the problem of the end user? I agree. You got to do your work. We did our work. You have to do your work. If you do not do your work, then this is not the business to be in. And if you don't expect your personnel to do the work, then they are the wrong personnel to have. Security, industrial security, requires commitment, and it requires sacrifice of time. No, not one of these vendors do I blame if I installed it with defaults, because it was my fault. There's no other person whose fault to this. I can't blame them. I can't say, "Hey, you know, guess what? That Windows was unsecure. Did you patch it? No. Did you change the registry to prevent X, Y, and Z? No. I didn't want to. I trusted that it was going to be secure." Well, then I paid the price. So that's just my 2 cents.
One last question over here. Can you use the microphone?
Yes. If you think from Internet of Things from a plant perspective or from a vendor support, then the risk of bidirectional communication is much higher than unidirectional communication. In terms that if I'm sending data from my device or from my process control to the vendor, then the risk is much less than having the vendor access. So the point now, with respect to Internet of Things, lies on the vendor. Why all the vendors insist on bidirectional communication? And if they insist on bidirectional communication, why they insist that the bidirectional communication gets encrypted, which means I will never see a threat coming from the vendor. And if I did accept the encryption, why does the vendors does not accept us to audit their network or audit their security policies or do a penetration test within their cloud? So it's getting to be more a matter of the vendor offering the technology, offering the service, but he is not offering it in the right manner. He's not offering it in a secure manner to gain the confidence of the plant or the operator to give this. What are the vendors doing about this?
Okay, this is the last question. Does somebody here want to answer that? Or
The only comment I'd make is we don't force bidirectional communication on folks when we're monitoring their stuff. So we have a service where we monitor your system to see if the patches are up to date, et cetera, tell you which ones to load. It sends you an email and says these are the ones you need to install for exactly that reason. Because, as I said earlier, a lot of this depends on what the data is, and if it's just going out, that's exactly as you said, then many times that's fine. So for when we're monitoring control systems or valves or something like that, it's typically the data's coming out, we do some analysis, and we're sending it back in an entirely different way, like an email, not in something that has to go into the actual control system. So not everybody does that, because I agree with you. I could see that being an issue.
Any of the other? Go ahead.
Sure. I think traditionally the Internet of Things really started with what I consider the high-value assets. High-value assets, typically the big machinery, where not only you wanted to have the information flowing out, but you also wanted to have the vendor intelligence coming back in. So typically, that's where the bi-directional thought that you're expressing is coming in. Does not necessarily mean you have to have it that way. As the net is being cast wider and wider with Internet of Things, you'll see more lower-end products coming into the net, coming into the picture for IoT and for intelligence and all that, and you're going to see that depending on the value, you may see unidirectional. The reason bidirectional is typically put in is really when you actually want that high-value asset to actually have some benefits that are basically learned from a group of vendors like you or others, that potentially that information needs to flow back in. And how you design that is really up to the experts, how the message flows back into your plan.
Just to clarify, I mean, because when we've talked about it, one of the things I know GE does, maybe the others do as well, but it's one reason you do the industrial internet is so that you can optimize the operation. And, so you're collecting the data, and then you have some algorithms to analyze it and optimize it. So then you have to do something with those results, or you aren't accomplishing that goal. Now, and your point is, if that's the goal you want, then you have to have bidirectional at some point. If it's not, then you don't, right? Yeah. I mean, if it's monitoring, you're going to send an alert saying you've got a problem. That's a different issue. Yeah. Yep. Okay, well, I think we've already overrun by 15 minutes. So if you join me before that, take the polls, and then if you join me in thanking the panel, thank you very much. It was very good.